Hello everybody, how's it going today? Glowplasma231 here, back in Data World Trigger chapter number 252. This chapter is titled The Away Mission Test, Part 43. Wow, it's really just hit me now that we are 43 parts into this exam. Like, I normally plan like a little bit of an intro bit every time, and this wasn't even the one I planned for this episode, but like, just reading that of like, man, it's part 43. It honestly is just like, wow, we have almost spent a third, or not a third, that's the wrong amount of numbers, but a fifth of this series with all these characters just sitting down and taking this exam. And I know on a monthly pace, it can really get sort of out of hand with like, yeah, they've been sitting in these rooms for like 5 years now. Really, in all reality, it's more closer to about 4 years, but even still, like, that's a long time for one manga to spend on like this, just like people sitting down, not doing much of anything. But of course, as we're going to be getting to by the end of this chapter, we are at the end of day 6 of the sealed environment phase of the exam, which means that, hey, we are on to day 7, the final day of all this various stuff. And of course, I'm recording this video in June of 2025, which means that, yes, we already have had new chapters for June, and of course, this is the chapter of May of 2025, and while it's not a double chapter, it's 21 solid pages of World Trigger content, and really, I think there's a lot of good stuff in this chapter, from Mizukami talking, Wakamura doing all of that, the A-rank judges doing all of their judges and critiques as sort of time goes on here, of course, till the eventual, like, hey, the HQ management desk is sitting down talking about everything, and they break down a lot of the whole idea of, like, hey, here's how the special assignment of the door got fixed for all of these squads, and it's just a really awesome thing to figure out and see how everybody talks about it. We even see more of Ryoji Kiriyama here. I'm sort of glad that we are seeing him more now that we sort of know that he actually exists, and of course how he's going to be a bigger part on the actual away mission ship, being that I think they said that he will be the lead engineer going on it, which I think is pretty cool. But yeah, honestly, just a lot of really solid stuff to go through in this chapter, and without any further ado, I just want to go ahead and get started talking about it. But of course, before we can talk about chapter number 252, we need to talk about what happened last time in chapter number 251. And of course, like last month, I should say the last month before this chapter came out, which was April of 2025, we got two chapters, which were chapter number 250 and number 251. We had a lot of debate in those chapters about like, hey, here's how all of the like doors are getting fixed pretty much. And we also learned a lot about the character of Sayoko Shiki and her side effect of like, hey, pretty much I can cover one of my eyes and pretty much view myself astral projecting out of my body pretty much. And it's like, well, that's a really cool like characterization thing with all of that sort of laying around. And of course, the end of last chapter was something that World Trigger loves to do, and honestly, arguably one of the worst cliffhangers that manga can get. But the cliffhanger we got was Mizukami going like, hey team, I got a proposal for all of you guys that I've been mulling over. And we just end with all, of course, Mizukami Squad 9 just sitting down, eating all of their food. Like, we even see Torimaru is, like, just holding a fork, chewing some food, and Mizukami's like, alright, here's my proposal. And we really don't pull any punches. We start off chapter number 252 on this exact same moment, where everybody's still sitting down eating, but we see that, like, everybody's sort of, like, now more locked in and focused on Mizukami instead of the delicious food that Colin prepared in front of them, right? And Mizukami, of course, starts off this whole conversation by being like, hey, well, my proposal's got to do with your whole point about Wakamura Squad, Kashio. And Kashio sort of speaks up like, oh, about the one about, like, they're doing assignments out of standard labor hours, like that whole idea. And Mizukami's like, yeah, that's pretty much the one I'm talking about right there, right? And I really love this next little moment as we see that Torimaru is currently chewing some of her food and actively puts over her mouth to pretty much like make sure that like everybody's not seeing her chew all of her food as she starts to speak. And she's like, hey, but then we already conclude there's no reason to worry about Wakamura Squad overtaking us. And we get the exact opposite now as Mizukami goes, dips his fork into some food, starts eating it, and he then starts to talk, being like, no, we're pretty much good on that front, like, we just gotta be more rivals than just them, pretty much, right? But he does it, and he doesn't cover his mouth in the slightest, which is honestly just fun little characterization of, yes, of course Torimaru is a proper person, would go and, like, cover up her food whenever she's eating with her mouth full, like, that's something I've got drilled into my head since I was a child, was like, hey, don't eat with your mouth full, it's rude manners and all of that, right? But the whole idea that Mizukami's like, nah, I don't give a shit about that, like, who cares, right? It's honestly just really funny. Mizukami, I can't believe I'm saying this, you're sort of funny, right? But the whole idea is that Torimaru then just says like, hey, so what you're talking about all is the other squads, pretty much. And Kon speaks up, saying, like, hey, Mizukami, are you, like, suggesting that perhaps Sua Squad or Kodera Squad might have also stockpiled a lot of their finished assignments to only earn points later on? And Mizukami's like, yeah, that's what I'm saying. And if so, there's still a chance that one of them could nab the top spot. And Troy is like, no, that's not good. Kashio just says, like, hey, but in terms of, like, raw ability to get work done, like, Murakami Squad is another one to watch out for, right? Which really puts into perspective, like, Mizukami Squad has 3 other squads to look out for. Granted, there's, like, other ones, but, like, I'm sorry, Wakamura Squad, you're not really going to build up to the point where it's important, right? But the whole idea of, like, yes, we gotta deal with we're Mizukami Squad, they have to deal with Murakami Squad, Sua Squad, and Kodera Squad here in the moment, right? And Troy just says, like, okay then, but how are we going to, like, counter their tactic? And Mizukami just says, like, yeah, about that, and we pretty much see that Kon's like, why are you just pausing here, right? But Mizukami just says, like, hey, the truth is, team, I already have a heap of delegated assignment screenshots on my computer, pretty much a lot of the stuff that we haven't tackled yet. I was busy saving all of these screenshots during the away mission, I was busy saving screenshots during the downtime between all of the battle sim matches today, and we see that both Kashio and Arfune are like, oh, wait a second, right? As pretty much Teruya puts this together, like, oh, well, that just means that we can adopt the same tactic, pretty much. And Mizukami's like, my honest take, though, I'm not really for it. And he just says, like, hey, I ain't for it. He's like, hey, say our rivals are really stockpiling all the points during all of the off hours, and we, like, hit them back by working overtime, too. Like, there's just not, like, really any tact to it. Like, there's no art at all, right? And Arfune is like, hey, but to be fair, like, we even don't know if that's, like, what all these other squads are up to. And Arfune is like, yeah, I mean, you have a true enough point there. We might be sweating and wringing our hands over our heads for nothing, right? But Kon then just says, like, but Mizukami, like, we're doing it, right? Like, we're just going to go and work overtime. He's just like, yeah, to make a long story short, we are. Since we've realized what's going on, we have got to respond somehow. And legitimately, this is the surest way to go about it. And honestly, that doesn't demand a new trick or tactic or anything like that, right? And Troy is like, hey, I mean, our general strategy all along has been to, like, keep ahead of the pack via our progress on the assignments. And she's like, hey, I can easily work till dawn on all of these assignments and homework, pretty much, right? And Mizukami's like, hey, I appreciate the attitude, but we don't need to do that. It's like, forget dawn and, like, a few more hours. Just till 1 in the morning is, like, plenty of time, pretty much, right? He's like, hey, we also don't want to end up in, like, a bad shape for tomorrow or anything, because, like, of course we know it's probably when they're eating dinner, like, a little before 8 at this point in time. So this pretty much means, like, hey, they'd have, like, a good 5 hours of work on assignments, and they don't need to be working till, like, the labor hours and, like, 7 in the morning and get no sleep, right? So Mizukami's like, yeah, we don't want to be in a bad shape for the final day. We really don't know what it holds. He's like, hey, if we go hard till 1 o'clock in the morning, and hey, if that isn't enough, then it's just my fault for getting all sloppy with the team, pretty much, right? I do like how he's taking blame for this, even though he knows that they'll probably come out on top, but you never truly know, right? And Kon's just like, hey, I've still got my operators report to write up at 9, so I'll just have to step away at some point. Mizukami's like, hey, your job, do whatever you need to do, whatever the border management says, pretty much, right? But the rest of them sort of get the whole idea of, like, hey, Mizukami's like, hey, sorry to ask more of you guys when we've already been through the ringer on all of this. I mean, Mizukami, you've done a lot to this squad. You hid the battle simulations, did all of this various stuff, made them not trust you, right? But either way, at the end of the day, all of the other people of Mizukami Squad 9 are like, of course, sounds good, right? We then cut over to Wakamura's Squad 11, as we just see Hisoya sitting down, eating all of her food along with Wakamura, I almost said Sazanami, which is one of the name of the families in Kagurabachi. Sasamori, Hanazaki, and Hyusei are all sitting down, eating dinner along with Hisoya, of course. And she's just like, geez, like, I'm all kinds of, like, scared now. Like, the others are for sure going to think we're cheating based on today's scores, pretty much, right? And Sasamori's just like, hey, I'm sure it's going to be fine, like, all things considered. Like, we really don't have anything to worry about. And Hyusei's like, hey, they just have nothing to balk at. Like, we earn those points to our sheer capability, right? And so it's like, I mean, maybe it sits well with you guys, but it doesn't really sit well for me. Like, do you guys see all of the point breakdown? Like, that just isn't normal for me. As we see, the whole idea is Wakamura Squad 11 score breakdown for individuals, and Of course, we see that Wakamura got 85 points, Hanazaki got 85, Sasamori got 80, Hyusei got 468, and Hisoi got 475. And this is really what Hisoi is talking about, like, yeah, those point totals just make absolutely no sense for what I'm sort of going through, right? And I also do like how we see in the valuation by A-rank agents, Wakamura has a +7, both Hanazaki and Sasamori have +11s, Hyusei has a +25, but Hisoi has a +13, which I really think comes from the whole idea of Hyusei knowing all the stuff and having it easier to input on Hisoi's computer, right? And I think a lot of the A-rankers gave them bonus points for that, pretty much, right? But, Sasamori just, but hey guys, like, the other squads can't see the full breakdown, so they just think that we all worked our ass off the squad, not that, like, just you did, Hisoi, pretty much, right? And, of course, Wakamura, who is still dealing with the whole thing of, like, hey, I just got the massive breakdown told me, he's like, hey, either way, I don't particularly see the issue. I mean, like, you've been a key pillar in, like, propping up our squad, Hisoi. And she's like, hey, but, like, I can't take all of the stress you're just dumping on me. Like, somebody else has to be Hyusei's little helper tomorrow because I just won't do it, right? And we see that Sasamori's like, well, Hanazaki, I mean, you sit on the other side of the guy, so do you want to do it? And he's like, hey, if everybody else is chill with that, maybe wanting to get a few points in of his own, pretty much. But I also don't think that that's, like, anything that Hanazaki is looking for, like, I need all of those points, pretty much, right? But I do like this little bit of an interaction where Hisoi's just like, I don't like this, and sort of, like, putting the blame on the, not really the blame, but the blame is a really bad way to phrase it, but putting the burden on another person, even though, like, I don't know how the A-rankers are going to be judging all of this, pretty much, because we now cut over to the monitor room where we see a bunch of the various people all doing all of this stuff and just talking about all of this, but none of them really talk about the whole idea of, like, yes, Hisoi is not willing to do this anymore. They really just talk about the overwhelming strategy that we get on the other side. Well, as I was just mentioning, now we cut over to the monitor room, where we see both Shun Midorikawa and Kazuma Satomi, both sitting down, of course, are two representatives we see in the moment here for Kusakabe Squad, both sort of sitting down, talking over all of this stuff, and Satomi's like, oh wow, would you look at that, like, Wakamura Squad score, it's like, really causing a lot of ripples among all of the top dogs, and Shun's is like, hey, Kudera Squad's been also hit as an unintended casualty, pretty much, right? And Midorikawa just explains, like, hey, since Wakamura's score shot up so unnaturally, suspicion has even fallen on Kudera Squad, who is pretty much a total bystander here in the moment, right? As we get to the idea of, like, yes, 1,920 points is just completely wild for Wakamura Squad thus far, but it is really cool just to see them taking those upper ranks and seeing what they sort of do with it, pretty much, right? But Satomi just explains, like, hey, they're definitely thinking there's a decent chance that Kudera will try to take the lead on the final day via stockpiled homework, so this could really turn really ugly really fast, right? And I love Midorikawa's sentiment of, like, but here's the thing, we're not in the trenches, so it's just like a blast to pretty much, like, watch from over here in the moment, right? Well, that's where we end with the Kusakabe Squad reps, as we look over to where, of course, the Tachikawa Squad reps are. As we see both Izumi and Tachikawa both sitting here, I love that we see that, like, Tachikawa is just eating a donut this entire time. Like, we see Izumi speaking on all of these matters, pretty much, and, like, he's just saying, like, hey, but why was Mizukami taking screenshots of the delegated assignments earlier? And as he's pretty much explaining all this, we just see Tachikawa mouth open, just eating a donut here in the moment, right? But, of course, as I was getting to, Izumi just says, like, hey, why was Mizukami doing that? He said he did it during the downtime between all of the battle sim matches, which was way before he saw Wakamura Squad's updated score, which of course gets sent out at 7 p.m. And all of those battle sims were happening way before then, right? And Zumi's like, was Mizukami already planning to work overtime tonight? And of course, Tachikawa, having the little bit of brains that he does, is like, yes, he probably was alone, that is. And Izumi's like, that makes a lot of sense, right? And we also remember back to his weird, like, sort of hesitation on, what was that, page... it was some page of the chapter, page number 3 of the chapter, where he was sort of, like, thinking about what to say, and Izumi pretty much explains that, okay, that really makes sense to his whole weird motivation back there. It's like, he didn't want to fess up to the plan he was planning to have the entire time, right? And Tachikawa just is like, hey, Kon and Arifune probably realized what he was up to, but they then broached to the topic as really mature as they are, right? Tachikawa, I like how you're pretty much sitting down and explaining this. Like, it shows that you're not the number one A rank for, like, there's a reason you are in this position, pretty much, right? But we now look over to where the Tamakoma 1 squad reps are, as we see that the two people here are Kurasuma and Yuri, as we see that both of them are sort of like sitting down here, and Kurasuma sort of starts off the whole idea of like, hey, being able to earn points while working overtime makes a lot of sense, but are we thinking that the management was fully expecting this course of action? I mean, if overtime is basically essential for earning a top score, it suddenly becomes a lot harder to accurately gauge a squad's talents. And Yuri just says like, hey, I really suspect that they want to observe all the agents' characters instead. And Kurasuma's like, hey, what do you exactly mean by that? And Yuri just explains like, hey, for instance, the exam guidelines state that every night at 9 p.m. the operator will go to their special room to write their daily report. And like, hey, anyway, that's how it's stated in the rules. But take note, nowhere does it say that the operator can't return to the main workroom afterwards. So some agents will assume that it's perfectly fine. As we get the whole idea of like a few different operators and how they sort of go around acting, the whole idea of like, yes, Ui from Suwa Squad 7 would be one to be like, oh yeah, I can go to your report, now back to put in some overtime work, right? Well, other operators like Rokuta and Shiki would be like, hey, we're in our own room, and of course Rokuta would have more of the idea of like, hey, I don't know if I'm allowed to go back out, like I don't want to break any rules, while Shiki's like, hey, this is a private room, all to myself, I don't like other people, I'm good to pretty much stay here, pretty much, right? And Yuri just explains that, like, hey, others might think that they're not allowed to return, despite the rules not explicitly forbidding it, right? And others would never dream of rejoining others willingly, right? And Kurasuma just says, like, hey, so what you're saying is that some will go lax with the interpretation of the rules, while others are stricter sticking to the letter of the law. And we see that Yuri's like, yeah, that's pretty much exactly the point I'm trying to make here, right? But I have a feeling that these loopholes were built into the rules in order to reveal something about each agent's personality, and that includes a topic of overtime, whether or not somebody opts for it. And like, hey, interestingly, Cone has proven to be a member of Team Lax, being able to come back out of that room after the fact. On the other hand, both Nire and Osano are fully aboard Team Strict. And it's funny how they really give the opposite impressions at first glance. It's like, yeah, you'd look at Osano, you'd look at Nire and be like, oh yeah, they wouldn't care about all of that, right? But in reality, they're the ones who care about it, while somebody so stuck up like Cone, who you would expect to like have that personality. I say stuck up simply because like that's just the look you get from Cone pretty much, right? Actually doesn't care. One of these whole ideas of like, hey, don't judge a Trion body by its cover, I guess. Honestly, that's probably the episode title for this chapter. Yeah, that's what we're going to name the YouTube video, right? But Kurasuma just says, like, hey, though assuming that you're pretty much alright, like, the management is probably going to give even more credit to those who find the loopholes, though, right? But Yuri says, like, I mean, maybe, I'm still just speculating on all of this, but I don't imagine that's the only thing they're rating agents on. We have this image of management finding great value in agents flexible enough to bend the rules to get ahead. As we remember back to Hyusei being the whole idea of, like, hey, solving these problems the traditional way is hardly a decent measure of our skills. Like, on a real mission, we need to adapt, which is the whole idea of, like, yeah, you need to be able to overcome, think of ideas on the fly, all of that very much stuff, right? But Yuri just thinks, like, hey, but imagine if, like, everybody in this exam took that approach. Like, the organization would suddenly find itself in a precarious position, pretty much, right? And without, like, shortcuts or loopholes, everybody in the organization is almost doomed, pretty much, right? But Yuri just says, like, hey, and that's honestly why I bet that the top minds at HQ also see a need for inflexible agents being people who prioritize rules over results, right? And just says, like, hey, and from what we can tell, Commander Kido has always been such a person. As we get a little bit of a flashback to, of course, Yuri was part of the original Old Border. Of course, both her and Reiji, now they're both the Tamakoma branch. And being in the past, we just get an image of Commander Kido, or Mr. Kido as Yuri actually calls him, just sitting at a desk, all of these notes on the wall, everything, and he's just like going through it, of course, in his own room, which Osamu now inherits at Tamakoma. And it's just really interesting to see how Kido's always been one to stick to the rules. And I love, as we now move over to the HQ management desk, how we just see that Commander Kido is sitting in the exact same position, head turned away from the audience, and just shoulders stiff as ever. And it's just honestly a really nice image as we look back over, like, oh yeah, Kido's doing this one way, and now we're looking at Kido another. I really like how this sort of shows the evolution, but how this character of Kido, who we really don't know too much about, all things considered, like, we know more than enough, but we don't know all of his various details, of course, as I'm sure we'll be getting at some point in the World Trigger series. So, it is pretty fun to pretty much just sit down here and be like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool, you know? But at this point, everybody at management is sitting down and, like, talking about all this various stuff. We, of course, see Commander Kido is there. We see both Netsuki and Kinuda are there. Of course, they're two directors of their respective things. And we also see that Director Shinoda is not here, but we see that Sawamura is here in his stead, pretty much, along with Mr. Kiriyama is here also, right? So these are the five who are going to be debating all of the, hey, here are the scores going on currently, right? As pretty much we see that Netsuki just says, like, hey, here we have all the evaluations of the A-rank agents as of 7 p.m. tonight. About 90% of the allowed points and demerits have been allocated thus far. As for the usage breakdown, points awarded account for about 98%, while 2% was pretty much factored towards demerits. And here on page 15, we got an entire breakdown of all of the various points that every single agent has gotten. And oh my gosh, we have so much information that we could possibly talk about here, right? The first big idea is that each A-rank judge was given up to 135 points to be used as either rewards or demerits, or pretty much anything else, right? So, like, wow, that's a lot. Like, so every single A-rank agent gets 135. I feel like doing all of the math there, but also I also don't feel like doing all of that. Like, okay, we know all the A-rankers are doing it, right? But hey, we also see people like Chief Cronin are doing it. So it's like, really, who is everybody who's like messing with all of this about, right? It's like, okay, like, who is all giving points? Of course, we know like the HQ management is doing it in a bit of a different way, but like, still, that's a lot of points, right? And then, of course, we see all of the various points all added together for every single person. I should say every single person but Troya. We don't exactly see what her number is. We can see that it is 3 digits and that it ends with a 4. And I think a 1 is what comes before it, but we honestly have no true idea. It's just covered up by a word bubble. So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, we don't really have the full picture here in the moment, right? But sort of just going through all these numbers, I'm not going to read all of them out, but we do have some very interesting ones. For instance, like, hey, a lot of these squad captains are doing very, very well. All have upwards of like about 100 or so points, except for a few direct ones. We see that Kitazoe only has 78 points. Mizukami only has 67. Granted, it really makes sense for how Mizukami has been acting. I'm sure he's also gotten a lot of demerits for all of his points awarded too. Even though the whole idea of only 2% of the points have been demerits in total, it's like, okay, maths is a little weird here, I bet. Murakami, 83, and Wakamura has 36 points altogether, right? Yeah, Wakamura Squad particularly isn't doing the best at all. And speaking of Wakamura Squad 11, we see that all of their points around the board aren't really anything to scoff at. Wakamura has 36 points. Hasoi has 98, Hanazaki 53, and Sasamori 89. Kyusei has 116 points. They have the lowest point total score out of any of the points. I say that, I now look over to Utagawa Squad 1. They have 2 less points, all things considered, mainly because they have both Shiki and Urashima. Urashima only has 27 points total, and it's like, wow, that's not very good. And you would think, like, man, that's probably like the lowest point total of anybody. And then we see Katori only has 13 points. Yeah, I really think that her not being a team player there and pretty much shutting down after she saw, like, her squad mates weren't doing so well really seems to be a big issue for all of them, right? Even though the rest of her squad, like, I think what it looks like to me, I would have to do the math for Mizukami's Squad 9. I'm actually going to do that real fast. Just type in all the numbers. Oh, I don't have my calculator easily accessible. It's in my D&D bag, which is on the other side of my room pretty much, right? But if we add all of these numbers together, let me just stall here for a second while I'm trying to figure out all of these. So 122, 128, that would be 250 together. So plus whatever Kashio got in all of the various things. We see that he got 107 points, 107. And then presumably whatever Toroya has, which I'm guessing is going to be like 117 maybe, or I think we ended with a 4, right? Yeah, it ends with a 4. So let's say she got 114 maybe. So Mizukami got, what is that? 538 points altogether. So I was interrupted there by a phone call. I don't know how clear I'm going to be able to edit it out of recording. But what I was in the middle of talking about was the total point totals of like the highest various point total altogether. And I think the Mizukami Squad 9 wins altogether. Granted, we don't know Toroya's full score and their pretty much calculated score altogether. But it seems like from my best calculations, they probably have around 535 to 540 points. While Suwa Squad 7 only has 510. So it definitely seems like, yes, the Smart Person Squad got the most bonuses altogether, right? As far as other, big outlier scores, of course, I talked about Utagawa and Shiki, who had low scores. Katori had a very low score. Kikuchihara also has 46 total points, probably being that he is not a very big team worker, all things considered. Both Kage and Taichi also have 52 altogether, which is yeah, they're not pretty good, or they both have 52 points. They don't, Kageura and Taiki's don't both add up to 52. Rakuda has 44 points. Then, on the other side, hey, really high at big points. We see that, Kuruma actually has a lot. He has 143. I guess he's just doing a good job being a captain, even though you'd be I don't really feel like he'd be getting all of those. We see that both Kodera and Suwa both have about 150 points, and Ninamiya also has 95, which is a little low, but I guess sort of makes sense. Murakami also has 83. Hayami has 99, and being that Hayami's pretty much been the backup captain to Murakami, it really does make a lot of sense, right? But of course, our main squad of Suwa Squad 7, and of course Tamakoma 2, we see that Ui, Oki, and Mikumo all have about 110 points, while we see that Yumakuga, Osamu Mikumo, Chika Amatori, and Hyusei all have a decent amount of points, with Yuma having 113, Osamu having 152, Chika only has 62, probably to her, hesitations of not being able to, do the Balisons, and the whole conversation that her and Ninamiya had at the beginning of Volume 27, and also, I also read that, last night, so that's why I know that, to, a big moment, and Hyusei has 116 points, so, seems like the points are very evenly distributed all around the board to who deserves them, right? I know I talked about that for a minute, but now getting back to what all the actual characters are saying, right? Director Kanuta pretty much just says, hey, well, that's not really many demerits, of course. Have they forgotten while we're having them judge in the first place? And Kiriyama is the one that sort of, gives the really good rebuttal to this, saying, hey, it can be really hard to penalize somebody you, know personally and work with. And Commander Kido also says, hey, there are also a lot of very clear trends regarding all the various points awarded. The points skew towards those who take the initiative and pick up others' slack, and provide clear, decisive leadership, pretty much, right? Or other effective ideas. As we see Kitora, Utagawa, Kon, Kuruma, Arafune, Osamu, Kodera, Suwa, and Hyusei all highlighted here, right? While Suwa does say, but what I'm not seeing is much, pretty much consideration for those whose work is flawless, but flies under the radars. Netsuki just explains, hey, the more relatable the contributions, the less noticeable they become, I suppose. Incidentally, the reliable contributions among all the various, among the most valuable during a long-term mission. Yes, the concerns for those who perform miscellaneous duties consistently, they have that note. There's no bearing of that really affects the score, pretty much, is what he's trying to say. Is we just see, yeah, Kumagai, Obiyashima, Hokari, and Kitazoe are all people who are washing the dishes, wiping down their areas, vacuuming the floor, and all that various stuff. But all of them are in the 70 range of points, pretty much. So it's hey, they're not looking too good, right? And then the whole idea about others who, none of their work, particularly stands out, but also it's their steadfast efforts that really keep the squad together, with the whole idea of, yes, Shiki, Tsuji, Rokuda, Okudera, Miura, Kagami, Mizukami, and Sasamori all have a wide range of points, but none of them are up above 90 points, just because, hey, their actions don't really scream, hey, watch me, and all of that various stuff, right? And Kido explains how he would have seen a lot more points to be awarded for those various actions, right? Kinuda also explains, like, hey, and what we might have expected in the long, like, for a sort of view of things, is that the A-rate captains and operators may as well, along with the members of Arashiyama Squad, took notice of all the small contributions, and that's where they gave their point credit, pretty much, right? And just says, like, hey, on the other hand, all the other rank-and-file agents were almost exclusively charmed by the more stand-out efforts. Especially when the numbers are involved, it's really not too easy to start using, like, the real go-getters as your measuring stick, right? So it's like, hey, whenever you, like, really start looking and start awarding points, you want to award to the points who are doing good, and the people who are doing good are normally the ones who are standing out the most, or at least that's what Kiriyama thinks, right? And Kiriyama just says, like, hey, if you sit down and also think about the whole idea of, like, soccer or basketball, your eyes are always naturally drawn to the players who got, like, the big racking up all the points, right? And Kinuda's sort of like, okay, that does make a whole lot of sense, right? But Kido just says, like, hey, that sort of view, Kiriyama, really works for, like, mere spectators, but as coaches and other players, they ought to be held to a different standard, right? And Kiriyama, I really like how he's saying this. He's like, hey, you've got to realize that's expecting a lot from these children, right? Like, they are just children at the end of the day, right? Netsuki then brings up the whole idea of the special assignment. He's like, hey, at the end of the day, 5 squads chose to break down a door, while 6 opted to repair it, right? As we pretty much see everybody who was hoping to fix the door. Of course, this was a conversation that Konami and Usami were having in chapter number 250. Everybody who wanted to fix the door, OG Squad 2, Kuruma Squad 5, Kodera Squad 6, Ninamiya Squad 8, Mizukami Squad 9, and Mizukami, Murakami Squad 10, all chose to fix the door, and the other squads chose to bring it down. I don't feel like naming off those other few squads. I do. It's Utagawa Squad 1, Kakizaki Squad 3, Kitazoe Squad 4, Suwa Squad 7, and Wakamura Squad 11. All of them chose to break down the door instead, right? And sort of looking at all of this, Kiriyama just is like, hey, I really didn't think that many would actually sit down and play Handyman, but it does give me a lot of hope. As the chief engineer of Border, I would really expect that that's what he would want to say, right? And I do really like how Kiriyama just says, like, it gives me hope, you know what I'm saying? I think that's really, really funny, right? But Sawamura then speaks up, just saying, like, hey, well, would you look at that? I got interrupted by a second phone call. I guess the world really just doesn't want me to talk about World Trigger chapter number 252. But I particularly forget where I was. I think I was talking about Kiriyama's comment on the whole idea of, like, people played Handyman, and that was a good thing for Border, pretty much, right? But Sawamura then sort of cuts in and just says, like, hey, the requirements for the squads having a passing mark was really they just restore access to the food pantry at the end of the day. So, technically, all of the squads did pass in that sense. Though beyond that, all of the squads who fix the door will be awarded additional points, right? As we do get at a look at all the agents who actually fixed the malfunction, as we see, of course, OG fixed it for Squad 2, Yuba fixed it for Squad 5, and Arafune fixed it for Squad 9. And them is sort of like all the agents teaming up together. Kurauchi and Murakami fixed it for Squad 10. Squad 8 had both Ozuma and Rin pretty much go together and fix it, or Kagami is what her last name is, so I guess Kagami and Ozuma both fixed it for Squad 8. And then both Kodera and Okudera, of course, as we saw in chapter number 251, both fixed it for Kodera Squad 6, right? And Director Kinuda just says, like, hey, and also as Agent Usami pointed out, we have no choice but to give extra points to both Yuba and Arafune in particular, right? Of course, the whole idea of making it easier for the engineers later on by taking pictures, images, and all that other stuff of, like, hey, this is how it's currently messed up, right? And, of course, Kiriyama, the chief engineer, says, like, hey, I very much agreed, but we don't need to forget Taichi. That kid, like, had his priorities and reasoning completely straight. He didn't just see this malfunction during a test, but he saw it as a road bump on the away mission. And I'd honestly say that Taiki earned a lot of good kudos for that. As Kiriyama just says, like, hey, and also, like, back then when he was making Trion Soldiers 2, like, I noticed how he tends to keep his feet on solid ground. And Director Kinuda's like, hey, I don't see any objections there. And pretty much everybody else is like, yeah, sounds good to the rest of us, right? And Netsuki goes in and pretty much, like, finishes up with some stuff on the computer and says, alright, and I mean with that, it seems like all of these special assignments have colluded. And he, like, looks at everybody's like, alright guys, this has been a job well done. And Sawamura's like, yes, thank you very much for putting all of this stuff together, right? As Commander Kido just is like, hey, I mean, the final rankings are more or less apparent at this point, but I do hope that our agents will push themselves to the very end, particularly with the upcoming combat phase in mind. As we just cut outside and get a good look at the border agency building, as we just get the narration that day 6 of the sealed environment phase is over, and on to day 7, the final day. And that's where we end this chapter of World Trigger, chapter number 252. Again, this chapter is titled The Away Mission Test Part 43. And like I said at the beginning of this video, I think that there's honestly a lot of really good moments that we get in this chapter. Really, I think I do enjoy the very end of the chapter where it's just like, hey, all the HQ management desks sitting down and talking with each other, of course. Sawamura, Kiriyama, Kido, Netsuki, and Kinuda, all just like talking about all the various stuff, talking over all of the points and how all of them work together. And just the total ideas of like, hey, here's how the judges are allocating their points pretty much. Here's how we would have wanted to see points allocated to these other squads. Along with the whole idea of like, hey, Kiriyama just says like, hey, I like how people fix the door. And I also think that we need to give a lot of kudos to the people who deserve them here in a moment, right? Especially if that involves agents like Taichi, who really had their ideals straight pretty much. I do like that sort of whole idea of, hey, it just works pretty well that way, you know what I'm saying? And I just like that Taichi's getting realization for that moment, because in chapter number 251 or 250, whatever chapter it was, I thought that he made just a really, really good point. Of course, we have all the other moments where, like, hey, the squads are talking together. Mizukami Squad has always been this weird one to where I understand their narrative role in the story, but besides that, I've never really been a fan of really any of the characters on the squad. Mizukami is sort of like a wet blanket. I like Arifune. I think Arifune's got a lot of good to him, and he also works into Murakami's general story, which I think shows very well in, of course, the whole idea of his character. And then Kashio and Tsuruya and Kon, it's like, yeah, you guys are sort of just like members of Oji Squad, Kakizaki Squad, and whatever squad Kon is a part of. I forget this second. I am sorry. But I never really cared about any of them. The monitor room had some good insights, definitely with Kurasuma and Yuri Rindo having the, like, big whole ideas here of the grand scheme of things. I like how everything went together and how they explained the whole idea of, like, hey, the idea of, like, the agent's characters and how that's also probably being texted. Of course, something that most of us probably knew, but it's also just pretty cool to see, right? And of course, Yuri's whole thing of, like, hey, we all know Commander Kido has been a very strict person to follow the rules since the beginning, and just getting a good look at him of, like, hey, when he was an old border, he was still the same guy. And I just very much like that at the end of the day. You know, just a good moment, like, good little building of, like, man, sort of warms my heart a little bit. And I know this was a 21-page chapter, but I know I definitely have rambled on for a good long while about it, so I think we're going to go ahead and cap all of the thoughts there. Of course, as I mentioned, I'm recording this chapter in this video in June, and by this point, the next 2 chapters of World Trigger had come out for June, but we are almost caught up with all of the released chapters, or at least I am making the videos on these. I don't know when I'm going to get this edited. I'm going to try to get it faster than normal, but I'm very bad about getting videos edited after I've gotten them recording sometimes, so oops. I'm not good at my job sometimes. But that's sort of just how it goes. This was a really good chapter, World Trigger, and really don't have any other big thoughts to say about it, right? But with all that out of the way, thank you guys so very much for watching this video on World Trigger chapter number 252. If you guys want to see my thoughts on other World Trigger chapters, I have a series starting at chapter number 277, or not 277, 227. And pretty much I've talked about my thoughts on every single chapter of World Trigger since then. So go check out those videos. There will not only be a playlist in the description box of the video you're watching right now, but also on the end card of this video. So go check out that playlist. And hey, if you like anime and manga related content and you like the video you've just watched and hopefully sat through if you're listening to this, well, I make plenty of other content on anime and manga. Go check out the channel at Glowplasma, or just like go down to the box down below and just like click my name. And yeah, just check out all the things I make down there. You don't need to, but I don't know, it's just sort of cool if you do. And yeah, I thought this was a very good chapter of World Trigger, and I'll catch you guys next time for World Trigger chapter number 253, along with chapter number 254. Like I said, I know that next month we have gotten 2 chapters. They've already been released, and they are also both very, very good. So I'll see you guys whenever I talk about them. Again, this was chapter number 252, titled The Away Mission Test Part 43. And yeah, I'll catch you guys next time. Hopefully, we don't have to discuss the wet blanket of Mizukami Squad 9 too much, but we probably will. I say we probably will. I know we have to talk about them at least a little bit next time, but sort of is how it is there. Thanks, guys, so much for watching. I'll catch you guys next time. Glowplasma